whereby John laid his head on Jesus' chest, and they had a brief conversation about something that was occurring, which is, again, the main part of the story. But to have that occur just shows the extreme confidence and love between Jesus and one of his followers, that would even occur. And it led me to believe, in addition to other things that I saw, of what a tremendous, loving person Jesus was. So having conversations with someone who is that loving was something that followed later on when I finally determined that Jesus was real, that he is our creator.
What happens when a successful, truth-seeking lawyer decides to put Christianity on trial? No preacher, no church, just one man, a stack of science books, and a Bible. In this powerful testimony, you'll hear how a skeptical attorney, once thriving in his career and confident in a purely naturalistic worldview, was challenged to investigate the claims of Christianity using the same sharp reasoning he brought to the courtroom. What started as a solo mission to disprove faith turned into a life-altering discovery that would dismantle his prejudices, reshape his understanding of science, and ultimately confront him with undeniable truth. Stay tuned as this former atheist lawyer takes us through his journey.
Finished law school, came back to the area where I grew up in, and I started practicing law. And things went very well. I thought life was getting better every day. The practice was nice, the financial rewards were good. And then I got a call from a friend who challenged me as to my worldview, my thinking about life. He said that, you are not going to have this opportunity much longer because you're probably going to get married. I wasn't married at the time, didn't have children, didn't have a roommate. And he said, with this amount of time, this would be an excellent time for you to review what you think about life. I called him back the next day, shocked that he would even make these types of challenges to me because, I thought life was fantastic. But I did concede to him that I didn't know everything about the scriptures. In fact, I knew very little. And that I could find out more about science as well to bolster what I thought about the natural explanation to everything. So I said, I'll give it a shot, and I'll pick up some books at the library on science and pick up a copy of the scriptures, and I'll start reading.
Now, I think it helps in the case you make today that you don't do anything in half measures. And maybe the other significant thing is that you didn't allow anyone into this process. You just focused in on this solo mission to discover, were you looking for truth? Were you really looking for truth?
Well, at the beginning, I really was not looking for truth. At least I thought that I was, but my prejudices were so thick, so encompassing of what my thought process was, that I really did not look for truth. In fact, I had to have a self-conversation about that and try and peel back my prejudices so when I read something, it could stand for itself. The evidence could speak for itself. But I also learned some things very early on in this investigation, so I turned from a casual reader into an investigator, particularly from science. I learned from elementary school that the planets circulate or orbit around the sun, but I never paid attention to how precise that system really is and how each planet had the exact size, traveling at the exact speed, at the exact distance away from the sun, so that they would perpetually orbit around the sun, as opposed to flying off into the galaxy or spinning into the sun. And when all 8 of these planets had that type of relationship to the sun, I thought, this is so complex, so amazing, so precise, that it defies a natural explanation. And from there, I even wondered, what else did I not know that I needed to know about science? And that's when I turned into an investigator.
Something kept you going, Michael. Kept you probing. And I'm just so thankful that you did stop, I know you are, and take time to investigate this instead of just going on in what was a very successful career path.
Yes, thank goodness for my friend. Thank goodness that he gave me a call. And it was that unique period of time of life that I was describing a moment ago. And thank goodness that something shocked me or jolted me into believing that I needed to pursue this further. I mean, casual reading, coming home after the end of a work day and reviewing something about science or reading the scriptures and just thinking I'm going to check off a box and call my friend back and say there's nothing here for me. But there was a few very quick and early type of experiences whereby I was jolted about something that I'd never considered before, and they kept coming. the more I read, the more I kept going into new directions and finding more truths that I hadn't considered. It's kind of like seeing dots on a board that weren't connected, but finally, even after that, they started coming together like puzzle pieces.
Right.
And like a mosaic, it all started coming together after a few months of doing this. It became more interesting as it went and more scary as it went, because I felt like I was getting closer and closer to something that would radically change my world.
And was there an aha moment, like Custer's last stand? This was it, you're done.
There was a number of smaller aha moments. Again, those things that I couldn't dismiss. I couldn't just set them aside. They were undisputable as to them being a fact and it being inconsistent with what I thought about our lives. But then when I finally came to the point of realizing it was more likely than not that I was a created being, that everything changed. It's like the walls of my prejudices started falling down. Any last crumbles would have come to the ground at that point. And then a few weeks later, I determined that that creator was the creator that's spoken about in the scriptures. Those were my aha moments.
What did you do?
Well, I took a few weeks without telling anybody what was going on, or that I had come to these conclusions, and just talked to God, first asking for forgiveness for everything that I had done and said before that point, and entering into a relationship with Him. And finally, without having a prescriptive time frame, I just came to the point where I was confident enough that I could tell my family and my friends what had happened.
You were concerned about the friends.
Well, I think I knew what was going to happen. I predicted to myself that my social structure was about to change dramatically. I didn't know anybody who was a believer. I didn't know anybody who thought about things the way I was now thinking about them, other than my friend, he lived hours away. He was just calling me on the phone. So none of my local friends had thought the way that I did, and I thought there was going to be a huge jolt to them as it was to me, and probably I wouldn't have these friends any longer, and that's what took place.
You didn't give up your profession. You continued, at least at that point, you moved forward with, tell us the stream of law that you've been working in.
My concentration was in real estate disputes and construction-related disputes. So I handled commercial litigation matters, some business disputes as well.
Nasty stuff.
But as far it can be, but at the same time, it's very exciting. It's a concentrated area of the law, so it's something that I enjoyed, and something I enjoyed doing and being good at, and getting better at it at the time. So I continued doing that, had a much more passionate heart about my clients at that point, and sometimes found the opportunity to share this great news that I had found out. But for the most part, the practice of law didn't change too much. I still had a business to run, still had to appear before judges and prepare for hearings and trials and things of that nature. And so that part didn't change.
You made a wise decision to become part of a church family. You lost some of the friends, I'm sure there was some alienation there, but you weren't left out in the cold.
Well, I had lots of time all of a sudden, because whatever I was doing before with my friends, going out, doing different social things, I was no longer doing that. And I was also extremely excited knowing that I had learned so much, but I had so much more to learn. And I was looking forward to people tutoring me, so to speak, by going to a church. At least that's what I imagined would happen when I went to a church. I had never been to a Protestant church before. You could say Methodist, Baptist, Nazarene, Lutheran, any of those, and I wouldn't know what you were talking about other than they were churches.
Wow.
But there was a very large church near the building where I worked. And so I knew that it had lots of activities. And that was the reason why I chose the church, just because there was lots of activities there, and I knew I needed to be there a lot.
You had such a hunger to learn the scriptures. The more you learned, the more you wanted to learn this. A new appetite awakened.
Well, again, at least for me, when I learned that there were these truths that I had never known before, and there was a boatload of them, then this is just world-changing, life-changing to me, my world. And so I wanted to learn more. I wanted to take all those pieces that I had put together and put more pieces onto that, because I knew there was more. I mean, how can someone like me in just a matter of months learn everything there is to know? I knew that there was many more things to know, and that would fill in on a more full basis what it is to know God and what it is to know who we are.
Well, it's a real learning curve, and I love the way you write. I've planned to quote you. I don't know if I'm going to do it today because our time has gone so quickly. I think this unleashed the poet in you. Has anyone said that?
I don't think anybody has accused me of being a poet, but
Wow.
I did take some time, because this comes from my heart. And when I was examining these truths that transformed me, I wasn't on anybody else's program. No one gave me a pamphlet and said, here's some things that you could read first. In fact, I rejected that from my friend. I said, I'm going to do this on my own because I don't want to be talked into anything.
You didn't want to be manipulated.
That's exactly right.
It had to be truth that compelled you.
Yes. And so when these pieces came together, I finally then am able to tell that story of what I saw, because it's a story. It's not just a series of do's and don'ts or here's how to live life. It's a story of a loving God who created us and for very specific purposes. And so in the book, I track those things that I learned that transformed me.
You say in your book, God uses messengers to surround us with his voice.
Well, God doesn't just speak to us through the scriptures, although he certainly does that. But everything that he has created around us does the same thing. From the heavens to you and I, to the things that are around us, he has put things in place that are like fingerprints of himself that also communicate to us that not only is he there, but he's powerful and all-knowing.
You say in the book that the more you discovered, the more you wanted to learn the relationship of these messengers to each other. You found a big picture.
Well, at first it wasn't that way. I was finding little bits and pieces here and there that were amazing in and of themselves. But when the picture came together and the relationship between these messengers, it overwhelmed me. It was a jolt to me that I've never had before. So it challenged me to keep going and find further relationships between all these things that God has made for us.
You really gave science an equal platform with Scripture. You were examining the elements, the realities of what we know about science as you were looking into God's Word.
Well, as I was performing my investigation, I was most comfortable with science. And that's something that I had classes in from elementary school through college. And the scriptures were a little intimidating to me. So I read a lot about science, thinking that not only am I going to affirm what I thought about life, which is that we are naturally caused beings. There's not a supernatural cause for who we were. But again, I was also more comfortable with that. So reading the scriptures, which I was less familiar with and a little bit intimidated by, but also the science as well. So the combination of the two is what I did as far as investigating, and on both sides of those things I came to understand that God speaks to us through both what he has created and what he has given us in his Word.
Thank you for giving us all the details in here. Oh, there's no way we're going to be able to unpack them all, but let's talk about that first messenger. You've already alluded to the supernatural fingerprint in nature, in the created world. Give us a couple of highlights.
Well, yesterday we talked about the solar system. So moving on from that, going from what we see in gigantic telescopes, now looking at what microscopes show us, that the amazing world of the cell and other small things, but particularly the cell, how much information God has put into each small little microscopic point. There's more than 3 billion sequenced bits of information that when coming together helps the cell perform all the functions that it does. Now in you and I, as adults, there is approximately 35 trillion of these cells that are all coordinating with each other to perform all the things that we do biologically as humans. It's outstanding. It's just mind-boggling. Now, on top of that, all of these cells, these 35 trillion, came from one cell. The information that was packed into that one cell caused division and multicellular coordination. It's just unfathomable.
And one cell is like a small city.
It is. There's so much there that then causes other things to happen from there. The division of cells into more and more, but then how they group together to do the different systems and perform the systems that are in our body. It's just outstanding.
I told you I'd make my case for the poet, and I could just read page after page. But you talk about nature, the implanted behavioral patterns of the birds that fly and the animals that... You say each creature sings its part in the harmony of nature's never-finished song.
Well, the more
Did you think like that before you came to Christ? That's what I want to know.
Well, certainly not. I mean, again, the explanation that most biologists would give is that everything we see around us, including ourselves, is caused by natural selection, meaning that there was an initial life, and there's been a sequence over a very, very long period of time of improvement of those lives because of little slices that occur each mutation, so to speak. So that's a gist of what the theory of macroevolution is as given to us by Darwin. So from that, I didn't come into my investigation, excuse me, believing that there was some coordinated activity, and that one architect and engineer had given us all these things around us and how they work together with each other. And so these implanted behaviors in animals and even in us, because we are social beings wanting to love each other. That'd be an example of one of our implanted behaviors. It's just something I found as one of the many, many, many ways that we can look and see God's fingerprint around us.
You say you discovered treasure when you opened yourself up to the Lord and to the truths revealed in His living and active Word. Certainly worked that way in your life.
Well, the first question I had was whether the scriptures are even true or not. I thought they might even just be ancient fables or some series of do's and don'ts. But the accuracy of them, as far as being historically accurate, much less accurate for our lives, was a big question of mine. And as I reviewed the prophecies and the miracles and other types of proofs that the scriptures give to show that they can be relied upon, were things that I had not only had never investigated that before, but it's absolutely amazing. How can there be, on the prophecy side of things, how can there be hundreds of predictions and that they come true to the extent that we've had those events occur? There are some prophecies that have yet to happen, but to the extent those events have happened so far and they be accurate to the detail, then what other explanation could there be other than God showing us that through His Word, that He is authenticating His words with prophecies?
You give a whole chapter to Jesus Himself. I mean, what a treasure. And you say conversations with the Creator became ours daily. You found a love relationship.
One of the things that really impressed me was the emotional character of Jesus, how He wept for those who were hurting, how He laughed with the children, just on and on how emotional He was. There was a scene at what we would refer to as the Last Supper, and He was eating dinner with His disciples, with the followers. And there was one point where the gospel narrative was writing about something else primarily, but there's a significant subplot whereby John laid his head on Jesus' chest, and they had a brief conversation about something that was occurring, which is, again, the main part of the story. But to have that occur just shows the extreme confidence and love between Jesus and one of His followers, that would even occur. And it led me to believe, in addition to other things that I saw, of what a tremendous, loving person Jesus was. So having conversations with someone who is that loving was something that followed later on when I finally determined that Jesus was real, that He is our Creator.
Takes you out of the religion mold, doesn't it? And invites you.
The word religion to me is some kind of stale type of thing where you might say yes, that's more likely than not to be true or not. But I didn't read the Bible that way at all. I read the story of God creating us and then sending Jesus, and Jesus doing what He did to then call us to this everlasting life. And everlasting life is not just being free from the temptations we have in this life, but is this incredible relationship whereby we're called to be His bride in Revelation. So the gathering of all the believers will then come together to be His bride. So we'll be joined together and joined with Him in ways we can only imagine. And to me, that's the heartbeat of what the Gospels and the overall Scriptures are saying.
That's why in one of your messengers, you actually call death the greatest day. Quote, "Like a lighthouse beckoning ships in from the seas, the reality of eternity calls us home." Death is part of the beckoning because of what you've illustrated, where it takes us, what has been prepared for us. Oh, let me just read one more, because I'm making my case too, Mr. Attorney. In the course of nature's choreographed performance, God issues His ongoing invitation for each of us to join the music and draw near to Him. Indeed, some who have taken the time to truly listen now dance to the music with endless joy. I have to take us to a messenger that some people will cite as the reason they will not consider a good and loving God, and that is the problem of pain. You refer to the education of pain. You and your wife have faced what for some must seem the ultimate pain and loss, the death of a child. How did this affect your faith, your relationship with the Lord?
Well, before even entering the investigation that I write about in The Beckoning, I had 3 high school friends, my best friends, that do anything for each other types of friends. And they had passed away in separate incidences as well. And so this, along with other issues, were part of my prejudices against the scriptures, Christianity, religion kind of thing. It was all something that I just kept at bay and wanted to pursue other things other than investigating that. But since becoming a believer, then my son Connor died. And so there's always a challenge. And I've determined that we're never going to know all the whys. There has never been an expert that knows everything about pain. That's just not something God has given us. And I've determined that from all the things that He does give us, that He is absolutely loving and knowledgeable about all the things that are taking place in our lives. And from the scriptures, when James says that to consider it joy when we enter into pain because it matures and completes us. And Paul talking about all the pains that he went through, saying that that kept him humble because God apparently pulled Paul out for a very, very special purpose. And that type of purpose could have caused him to be boastful, but instead his pain caused him to be more humble. So pain works in us in ways that are mysterious but yet good. And also look at what happened to Jesus in the last 24 hours of His life. When He was scourged and then put on the cross for 6 to 9 hours. We cannot imagine. We can say we can only imagine, but I would say we cannot imagine the excruciating, deep pain that took place in one person's life. And so if in fact the greatest day in humanity, which is the salvation of man, occurred with so much pain, I have to leave open the possibility that pain works wonders to us when we respond properly in our lives.
From scientific skepticism to spiritual awakening, and reveals how the evidence, both in nature and scripture, led him to a verdict he never expected. What began as a mission to dismantle Christianity ended with a soul transformed by truth. The evidence was undeniable. The courtroom of reason gave way to the presence of a living Savior. This story is more than just about a lawyer. It's about every one of us who's ever doubted, questioned, or searched for answers. You don't have to check your brain at the door to believe. In fact, the truth of Christ holds up under the greatest scrutiny. So, what's your verdict? Will you walk away unchanged, or will you examine the evidence for yourself? Thank you for watching. If this testimony spoke to you, share it with someone searching for truth. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories just like this.